Hello everyone, Derek here. I'm here to bring you another video for our Walking Dead countdown to the Season 5 premiere. If you are watching this, that means that we are exactly 45 days away from the upcoming 5th season of The Walking Dead. Getting closer, folks, getting real excited. And as I said, when we get down to various days, I was going to do episode reviews. And today's episode is going to be What Lies Ahead, which was Season 2, Episode 1. It was the season premiere. And, it definitely was a good season premiere. I definitely enjoyed it. Definitely gave us a lot to look forward to. And it's kind of appropriate, like what lies ahead is like a question that we always ask about the Walking Dead world in general. As we try to predict what's coming in Season 5, we definitely have a lot of things that we are looking forward to. What does lie ahead for the group? And at this point, we believe that they are headed to Washington. But at this point, the group was basically just coming out of the Season 1 premiere. So maybe like a day or a couple days after the events of the final episode of the first season, where the CDC exploded. So, just in case you're not caught up with the show, you're just starting to watch it, there may be spoilers. So please, again, if you are not caught up on The Walking Dead, please do not watch this video as it may contain spoilers. Okay. So, as I said, in this episode, what we have is the group is getting ready to go to Fort Benning, which was Shane's original idea since the CDC turned out to be completely a failure. They thought that maybe it was up and running. It really wasn't. Jenner was the only one running it, and the CDC ends up losing all of its power and blowing up. So, they're on the highway. They're trying to get to Fort Benning, and they end up getting basically caught behind all this abandoned traffic. It was basically a big traffic jam of cars that were abandoned during the initial stages of the zombie apocalypse, as well as some people have died in them. There's bodies in the car. And basically the group takes the moment because the radiator hose once again breaks down in the RV, so they take a moment and start looking through everything, basically going through and trying to find supplies. And while they're doing this, they're introduced to the Walker herd, which we understand as when a big group of zombies basically just comes at you all at once. Like the theory behind the Walker herd is that the walkers, basically, if one walker sees another walker walking, kind of a pun, a little play on words there. If they're walking and a bunch of other ones see it, they all start walking together as a herd, kind of basically thinking, well, if that walker's walking that way, maybe there's food that way, so I'm going to start walking, and then somebody else sees it, and, it's just basically they all hook together, and maybe after a while they don't know where they're going, or they lose, like, any interest in food. It's just they're walking for the sake of walking. Well, they end up getting caught in the middle of it, so everybody hides under the cars or in the RV or something. And a lot of things happen in this. First, we have T-Dog cuts his arm very badly. I mean, he pretty much cuts an artery in his arm, and he's bleeding all over the place. Daryl comes to his rescue, so we have that happen. Andrea is also attacked in the RV, and Dale drops a screwdriver down to her so she can take care of the walker. And Sophia ends up getting discovered during this, and she's basically chased into the woods. Rick immediately jumps into gear, goes right after her, finds her, and basically tells her to hide, and he'll take care of the walkers. Takes care of them, goes back to where he left Sophia. Sophia's no longer there. Sophia left. The group goes out and tries to look for her, and they're unable to find her that first day. And Rick and Daryl end up coming across the walker that was wandering in the woods. They cut it open to make sure that it wasn't eating Sophia. It turned out to be eating some kind of animal instead, thank the good Lord. And basically, most of this episode is dealing with trying to find Sophia. But there are a lot of other things that are going on in it, which is why it makes a very good episode, because it really makes us look at the situation differently, seeing how everybody's feeling and seeing where things are going to come to a head. Because what ends up happening is you have Shane, who is still dealing with everything that's happened between him and Lori. And in order to try to distance himself from that, he becomes very cold towards Carl. He doesn't want to, have a relationship with Carl anymore as like a father figure because it's painful for him. And he basically tells Lori, I'm leaving the group. When we get to a good point, I'm just going to separate and go my separate way. And I think the reason why he does that is because he just can't deal with being in a group with Lori, the woman that he loves, and having Rick there. And that's completely understandable. Maybe if Shane would leave, all those problems would stop and he could start out somewhere fresh. And maybe he'll find somebody that he loves. God only knows. But Shane is prepared to leave. And Andrea is another big plot line going on during this episode because she's still suffering from Amy's death. It's definitely not easy to get over a family member dying, especially when they die right in front of you. And Andrea is basically upset at Dale because Dale stayed in the CDC, forcing Andrea to basically leave, or else Dale would have died, and Andrea did not want Dale's death on her hands, even in the last moments of her life at that point. And Andrea basically is upset at Dale because he took away that chance for her to, die the way that she wanted to on her own terms, which, again, you kind of see both sides of it because, Dale's thinking that, Andrea's grieving. She's definitely been through a very terrible ordeal, and that maybe later on she would not want to do this if, if Amy was still alive, Andrea wouldn't want to have died at that point, maybe. And Andrea is basically upset at Dale because she took away that chance. And you could also see that with Andrea. The Walking Dead world is tough, and I honestly don't think that it is for everybody. When you're living in a world like this, only a certain type of person can survive a zombie apocalypse. And if you don't think you're up for it, you're going to opt out. You're going to, kill yourself or whatever the case may be. And Andrea wanted that. Andrea does not want to die a slow, painful death from being eaten by walkers or malnutrition, none of that. So she's definitely upset, and the group is basically keeping her, it seems like they're keeping an eye on her, or they're kind of, Dale takes away her gun, and Shane does too. Shane does it on the purposes of, he wants the campsite to be safe, and if everybody's holding a gun and they're not trained, then accidents can happen. And Dale basically does it because he thinks that Andrea might use it, to kill herself. And you see a lot of that going on, and Andrea just doesn't feel like she's a good part of this group. And she's also, again, she's upset at Dale. And I think that everybody sees her as a ticking time bomb, that at some point she's going to try to kill herself or something like that, because that's what she wanted at the CDC. So Andrea basically tells Shane that she'd like to go with him, whenever he leaves the group, because she sees them as the outsiders. And you can kind of almost see that, Shane just being an abrasive person can rub people the wrong way, which he does. He frequently butts heads with people in that group all the time about, what they're going to do. And one of the big things that happened in this episode is Rick and Shane's belief as to, should they be out looking for Sophia? Shane at this point is basically thinking in terms of survival, and he's thinking, hey, we're in the middle of a highway, we're unprotected, we need to get to Fort Benning, that's the only way we're going to be safe. I'm sorry that Sophia's missing, I understand it's a little girl, but, part of him is, he's going along with it because in one sense he cares about Sophia. He's not a heartless person, but on the other hand, it's also because Rick and everybody else is basically able to say, hey, no, we're going to look for Sophia. We're going to do the right thing. Because otherwise we're hurting Carol. And the other thing is again, it's a girl. It's a little girl. It might be different if some adult goes missing, but Sophia, being a little girl, they want to find her. They want to reunite her with her mother. They want to see some kind of hopeful moment. And it's also just the right thing to do. Again, having a little girl out there who has she's not grown up, she's not experienced in how to deal with these situations, she's vulnerable, and they want to be able to save her. It's doing the right thing. When a kid goes missing in real life, right now, if a kid goes missing, what are we going to do? We try to find them. It's the human thing to do, and it makes sense. So there's definitely a conflict of ideals there. And again, that's Rick and Shane butt heads. You see that happen. And then Dale also takes steps to make sure that they do the right thing. Because again, Dale is all about humanity. He wants to keep humanity ideals within the group. So he actually fixed the radiator hose, but he doesn't tell anybody. Reason being is because, again, and he even justifies it. He says, well, if everybody knows we're mobile, then we're going to want to get moving. And Dale doesn't want to see that. Dale, like Rick and Carol and many of the other group members, want to find Sophia. And if if they think they're trapped there, then they're more likely to just surrender to the idea of, well, there's nothing else to do, let's go look for Sophia. Whereas if the RV is fixed, then they might think, well, we need to think about, should we really be moving, or can we really afford to look for this girl? And it is a valid argument. And the fact that Dale has taken away that chance of them being able to leave shows that he's trying to take steps to make sure they find Sophia, which is a great thing. Again, it's about doing the right thing. So the group they end up getting to a church eventually in their search. And, Carol goes inside and prays, and we see that, Carol is religious, and she tries to appeal to Jesus to, grant her prayer to find Sophia. And she talks about how she, prayed that, God would provide them with a path, to survive, and he has. And she even admits that she prayed that God would take Ed away, and, well, he did. Or maybe, whatever you may believe, or whatever you believe as to what God does and does not do. I mean, I'm religious, I believe in God, but I don't profess to be an expert in, whether God granted Carol's prayer, or whether it was just circumstances that just happened to be, it was just Ed's time. I don't know. But you see how Carol's interaction with her prayer is, and then Rick steps up to not necessarily pray, because we find out Rick really shows the way he feels about God in this episode. He admits that he's not much of a believer. Now I think that he, part of him does. I think that you could probably portray Rick as somewhat of an agnostic, not so much as an atheist. He's just, he's not sure. He's not sure just, if he should believe in God, if all this, makes sense to him. Rick admits that he put his faith in other things. And what he asks for God to do is show him a sign. Basically, he wants to know if he's doing the right thing. And that's definitely important for Rick, because the Walking Dead world is definitely a hard thing. And again, you're faced with challenges. I mean, in one sense, Rick thinks that, he did the right thing by going after Sophia, but people feel differently about it. I mean, Carol especially partially blames Rick, and Rick maybe is thinking, well, maybe I could have done more. Maybe I could have, carried Sophia a lot longer, or I could have told her different directions, or I could have done this, I could have done that. Rick is definitely blaming himself for Sophia being out there. And I think that what he was asking God for was a sign that he's doing the right thing, that he's on the right path, that he's going to be able to keep his family protected, and that he's going to do the best thing for the group. And that's what he wants. So Rick, Shane, and Carl end up going off in a different direction, and the rest of the group ends up, going back to the highway because it's starting to get dark. They need to get there, or else they're going to be in a lot of trouble being stranded in the woods in the dark. And on the way there, group members start to voice their opinions. Carol's upset that, that Sophia hasn't been found and thinks that it's everybody's fault, and Andrea's ticked off about, not having her gun and the way everybody's been. And Lori, she steps up to the plate and she basically says, okay, all of you, shut up. Defending Rick. She's coming to Rick's rescue, which is something a wife would do for her husband, as a husband would do for his wife. Lori basically hands her gun to Andrea and says, here you go. Just quit looking at me. Fine. You want a gun? There's your gun. Do what you want with it. And she basically tells Carol, Carol, you need to stop blaming Rick. Which again, she justifies it. Did anybody else get up and go running after Sophia? No. Everybody else was too busy. Well, some of them didn't see what happened. I mean, you got to give some people credit. But, Shane could have ran off after them. He was right in that vicinity. Did he? No. Rick was the only one that did anything. And he jumped right to it without hesitation to go save Sophia, which is more than what any of them did. And, Carol blaming Rick for what happened is just, inappropriate for the circumstances. He did try to save her. And that's important to recognize. And, I like seeing Lori step up in this way. It shows how strong of a character she is, and that she's going to, protect and defend her husband whenever necessary. And perhaps the biggest plot point that, the biggest game changer, the part that made you scream at the television when it ended was Carl ends up getting shot. Now there's this great moment where they come upon this deer in the woods, and it's a very nice, moment. They're sitting there and they see the deer, and Rick and Shane are like, "Come up and see it." It's like a beautiful moment. It's like in that moment, sometimes you can like maybe forget that there's a zombie apocalypse going on, and instead it's like maybe it's a father-son hunt, or just coming upon a deer, something so beautiful and precious, in a scene like that, you think that it's a moment of reality for them, that it's an escape. It's kind of like going to the movies to escape your problems in real life. Sometimes you go to see a movie for an hour or two, you forget about all the stress in life. Seeing that deer, it's like a sign, like, oh wow, look at the beauty of the world. Let's forget for a moment that we're in a zombie apocalypse, you know. And unfortunately, that moment is shattered when a gunshot sounds, and Carl ends up getting shot. And that basically leaves us off. It left us off with a nice cliffhanger. I mean, you're left to wonder, where is Sophia? Is Carl gonna live? And boy, I'll tell you, it's a bad episode for a kid to be in a zombie apocalypse. I mean, pretty much the only bad thing. I mean, T-Dog cut his arm, but it really just shows like how hard it is to have kids in the zombie apocalypse, and the dangers that can be associated with keeping the kids in your group, which of course you want to. I mean, don't think that I'm suggesting that leave kids on the side of the road in the zombie apocalypse. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that you realize that sometimes your group is more ideal when you have certain people in that group, and having kids in your group is definitely a challenge because you want to protect them, and you see how hard it is. And I think the thing is allowing Carl to grow up would be a lot better for him. And I think that's definitely a challenge. Trying to keep Carl safe is not allowing him to grow up in this world. Like, you see them all the time, like even earlier in the episode, Lori's like, "Carl, you stay in my sight. Sophia, you stay in my sight." Well, I understand they're kids, but this kind of changes the circumstances here. You always trying to protect kids and shield them in a zombie apocalypse is just not a good thing. You're not teaching them to defend themselves. You're not doing like the sensible thing. And I think that you see this later on in the series. But I mean, maybe if they would have trained Sophia to defend herself, maybe she might have been able to defend herself against the walkers, and that could have changed everything. I mean, coulda, shoulda, woulda. But you realize in this episode just how hard it is having kids in the zombie apocalypse, and what you're supposed to do with them. It's a hard task. It would definitely be hard raising a kid in a zombie apocalypse, but you're gonna do it. Your children are the future of the zombie apocalypse, or just the future of the world in general. We see that now. Kids are the future leaders of America. Someone somewhere out there is going to be the future president of the United States, the next big businessman. Somebody in the zombie apocalypse, some kid is going to end up being the person that tries to put this world back together. And you got to prepare them for that. And that's why you should value your kids in the zombie apocalypse, for sure. But it definitely was a very hard episode for them. But I'm going to bring this video to a close. I've said everything I wanted to about the episode. It was a great episode, and definitely, set forth a great plot for the entire season. Really enjoyed it. Thank you, everyone. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave them. Feel free to subscribe. And I just want to thank everybody that has subscribed and has watched the videos. I really appreciate it. It means a lot to me. Thank you again, and I hope you have a wonderful day. Thank you.